big.
60 meters is 200 feet,
So it's only 100 feet off.
plus the length of the building.
Yeah, I think we asked for a variance up to 140 meters because they asked us to include septic field as well. So that 140 meters.
Yeah, when you see the building and the fence and stuff,
Was
it's not.
over there.
That's why I had that in my head at that number.
50 feet away from the fence.
Yeah. From that fence, yeah. Yeah, that's why I took the picture, because it's, it looks different that way than it does on the piece of paper.
Big day.
Okay. Any more questions or concerns?
Good, okay, sure, great. Yeah, oh, sure, okay.
And what we'll do, we're gonna bring this to a vote. Because we can, we're gonna. Because we have had an issue previous about having our hands up with some of these. And so we'll do this by secret ballot, yes or a no. And
Support or not support.
okay.
Yeah,
So we're supporting
Yes
this,
or no?
yeah, yes.
and then we count them up. Just so that, like you say, then it's.
He stole it first.
Oh,
I just stole it.
There you go.
So who do we want to give these to look at?
Also, I was gonna say let Nelson grab maybe.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Fire squad.
So one more.
Did you get everybody or not, Nelson?
Did you do it, Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hold it.
Oh.
He's getting ahead of.
Golden ticket.
So you gotta like sign the checks.
Six of us today.
Yeah, 6, right?
It's unanimous support.
Okay. Very good, thank you. Okay, so that is carried. Next, any questions, or we moving on? Moving on.
You're
Feel
good.
free to stick around if you want, I can let speak myself, thank you.
You're all on.
Thanks, Judy.
Well, I want to, I'll run home and snack. Yeah. Can be observer number one. Six. Point one. Point else.
All right, on to the next thing, Central Kootenai Invasive Species Society presentation. And they're on the screen.
Yeah, I see Lori there.
So this would be Lori Carr, I take it?
Yes, it is. Should I share my screen? Do you have a screen up?
Yeah,
We got a screen.
we do, yeah, if you're able to share a screen, go for it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let's. Is it gonna allow me to do that? Okay. I have to go through some technical thing first, apparently. But anyways, I'm Lori Carr, and
As long as you're loud enough so we can hear you, that's the
Okay.
big one.
can you hear me?
We can, yeah, as long as there's no ambient noise, we're good.
Okay, let's see if it will allow me. I didn't. It's not prepared for this part of it. Okay. Here we go.
So thank you for coming, and we look forward to what you have to tell us about weeds.
Yes.
We can see your screen now, Lori, thank you.
And awesome. Thank you very much for the invitation to this. I'm happy to share what we have been doing in the Creston area. Thought this would be an interesting opportunity to share a bit of the work that we have been doing with the Regional District of Central Kootenai. We did receive some funding last year to do some agricultural land surveys. And I just wanted to present the results on that. So We did do 10 landowner interviews, and some of the results that came out from this was that, probably no big surprise, the larger producers are fairly knowledgeable about invasive plants in particular, but the smaller producers and the new landowners require more assistance. The assistance needs that people were naming. Is this all okay?
Yeah, we're just, I just out if you could, raise the volume and we're having trouble doing that. So if you could speak a bit louder, appreciate
A bit
it.
louder? Okay, I'll yell.
Okay, interpret it
Is that all good?
Just if everybody can just not ruffle, not speak, that helps too.
Okay. The assistance needs that were listed were equipment loans, financial assistance, management experience assistance, treatment, and general prevention of new species and incursions. And the main issue for most landowners is the lack of control of invasive plants on adjacent lands, particularly road rights of ways, crown land, and CP rails. Generally, the landowners feel that they are keen to manage invasive plants on their lands, but they are continually spreading onto their property from adjacent unmanaged lands. And another issue that was brought forward is the lack of a qualified herbicide contractor in the Creston area. So this appears to be a barrier to better control of invasive plants on the landscape. Some species of concern that came up were poison hemlock, Borealism, wild parsnip, all which have toxic properties, burdock, scentless chamomile, Canada thistle, orange hawkweed, chicory, and spotted knapweed. I just wanted to talk about, do I have a slide on this? No. I'm going to talk about poison hemlock a little bit later. It's kind of an interesting species. So the impacts of invasive plants that were listed were impacts to productivity, infrastructure, human health, and recreational opportunities, as well as reducing the quality of product, and some of them are toxic to livestock. As it suggests, poison hemlock is deadly if it's ingested, and one producer suspects she did have a calf die from the pregnant mother grazing on this species. And the presence of invasive plants, especially poisonous species, reduces hay marketability. That's a terrible word, I can't produce it. Marketability. So out of this work, as well as just the general work that we do in the area, we are making some recommendations to the Regional District of Central Kootenay with regards to invasive species, and that is to continue coordination funding to CICUS, to implement a service area bylaw to collect funds to create an invasive species program. We do have an invasive species strategy that is on the table, part of which this work is relating to, but there isn't an established program. To continue to integrate invasive plant control into their operational budgets, and this is for regional district-owned lands only. And in order to address private property concerns, we also recommend establishing a landowner outreach program. We do a bit of landowner outreach under Ministry of Forestry and Ministry of Transportation funding, but it isn't really sufficient. And possibly the appointment of an inspector under the Weed Control Act. The coordination funding will be used for the Regional Invasive Species Working Group, which we just had this morning, and the Poison Hemlock Eradication Action Plan. I don't know how familiar people are with poison hemlock. It is quite a tall species. It has these little white umbrella flowers. It's on about 20 sites in Creston. It has these purple splotches on the stem. It's highly toxic to livestock and humans with no known treatment. I put in these more morbid pictures, but it was used to kill prisoners And they do think Socrates was killed using poison hemlock. And as I said, it can cause calf deformities as well as death in livestock. It was first found at the Erickson Elementary School when the BC Wildlife Federation put in a wetland, and at that point we found that poison hemlock was quite abundant in the area, and that has been managed for the past 6 years. It's been reduced, but there's still some poison hemlock in the area. And there you can see it's just been highlighted where exactly the poison hemlock is. So as I said, there are about 20 sites in the area, 18 of which are in Creston. It's along Dodds Creek. It's along the roadsides. It's on Kootenai land, Kootenai band land. It's in a few agricultural fields that we know of. We think it's spread on the CP rails to Nelson. And there's one site as well in Salmo at the resource recovery facility. This particular one has been treated. There is some treatment happening right now with the Ministry of Transportation and the Ministry of Forests, but there's still all of these sites along the Dodds Creek that have not been addressed, as well as some other sites on private property. So we are recommending coordination of a plan to get all partners together to deal with this plant before it spreads into agricultural hayfields. And that is my short recap of what we've done. And I was just here to receive questions or feedback on any subject matter. So that's it. Thank you.
Do you have any detailed stuff on some of the other toxic and nasty ones too, or?
Well, there's Hori alyssum, which is toxic to horses.
Yes.
And wild parsnip, I'm not sure how much, I think that it's also toxic to livestock. It's more of an irritant. It's not as toxic as poison hemlock, but they do grow together. So management of one tends to manage the other. Those are the two main ones, it's the Hori alyssum and the poison hemlock.
Lori, thanks for the presentation, and apologies to the group. I only found the volume button towards the end, but I think we were able to hear all of your presentation. I also wanted to say thank you for sticking with us. I know we tried to coordinate this meeting, I think back late last year, so appreciate your patience and finally getting with this group. If you wanted, you could, unless there was questions about the presentation, you could stop sharing and then we can see you a little better.
Okay, great. I thought I did stop sharing it. Here we go. Okay, there we go.
There we go. That's great. Thank you. And again, great presentation. Thank you for the info.
Yeah, I mean, originally was to say, hey, do you guys have any feedback on how you want this survey to roll out? But it's okay, it rolled out. So I'm just always available to hear what the agricultural community requires.
Okay. Gary, you
and to get ideas.
Yeah, I have a question through the chair for you, Lori, and no, I'm not the agricultural community, but we talked about this, how many years ago, about an inspector under the Weed Control Act. And there's a big thing about how it would be funded, how the position would be funded. How there is in East Kootenai, I understand, there's an active inspector. What's your experience? Are you aware of how those positions are funded? Can your organization be instrumental in getting funding because you have access to provincial money? How is that working in other areas?
Yeah. So I don't know exactly how it happens with the REK. I haven't asked them specifically about that, but we did talk with the Columbia Shuswap Regional District, and they get funding through the province for that particular position, the weed inspector. And they're the only ones I know of that have a weed inspector. So I haven't asked anybody else about it because it's fairly recent information. But they get about 26,000. They get bit more, I think, from the province to support that position. And then they give most of that money to the Columbia Shuswap of Invasive Species Society, and they do landowner outreach with that. So not enforcement, but just site visits, letters to landowners, and then they help them with management plans and just general knowledge and training.
If I can follow up, but without the inspector, the formally designated inspector, you don't have the enforcement tool of issuing fines. So they're not
Nope.
trying to do that in East or Columbia Shuswap?
The East Kootenay does enforce. They also have a bylaw. So I can't remember if they're just enforcing their own bylaw or they're also, but it could have been they're enforcing their bylaw through the Weed Control Act, which limits the species that you can enforce. It's only the ones listed on the Weed Control Act, which are extremely out of date. But they do issue tickets, mostly just to CP Rail is the only place that they've really had to issue tickets in the East Kootenays, and the Columbia Shuswap does not issue tickets, and they have decided not to do that because they prefer the educational route, primarily because Crown Land doesn't manage all of their species, and they feel like that's somewhat unfair
Okay,
to
thanks.
ticket private landowners. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm assuming some of my guys are chomping at the bit to say something on this.
Yeah. Got a question. So what portion of your budget is gonna be spent on your target plants there?
The poison hemlock?
Yeah.
Specifically? We have applied for funding from the RDCK, and that's $15,000, and that is, but that covers a lot. That's general coordination money, including the working group, as well as other coordination and public contact. So part of that portion will go to poison hemlock. Then I am applying for a Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation grant to cover the costs of landowner outreach and training and public education, and also to cover some wages to actually do some poison hemlock control. I don't know exactly how much of what is going to go to what at this point, or if we are going to get the grant at all.
Dale, go ahead.
I kind of find it a little bit troubling that the last thing on the list of your activities towards poison hemlock is actually killing it or trying to kill it is on the very end of your list.
Oh, I
know that
see.
I know that there's rules and regulations and proper protocol, but we struggle with living here in the valley of spending a lot of money, but doing very little killing.
Yeah, so definitely that's part of the grant, is to support the actual control of poison hemlock. I have in my mind the idea that we could get the community involved in controlling it, because a lot of it is on riparian habitat, and that is Ministry of Forests land. Obviously, they haven't been able to control it properly, so we do need more people on the ground. How that is going to come to fore, I'm hoping that we can get the community involved in that to get out and help. I just don't know if anybody has the capacity to fully manage it on their own. Definitely the Ministry of Forests is doing some management, and the Ministry of Transportation is doing some management, but the hope is that if everyone can get together and decide, yes, we're going to focus on the species, that more resources will go to this one species for the next couple of years in order to really knock it back. I do believe quite a few of the sites are in City of Creston property, and so it would be involving the City of Creston, which to date I think has really struggled with this species. I'm not exactly sure why, but that would be part of the conversations, is trying to figure out what the barriers are to actual management of the species.
Just a follow-up on that. What chemical is approved for for the control of the hemlock?
Oh, I don't know exactly which ones are. I'd have to find that out for you and give you that information.
My thinking is that I believe this weed can grow anywhere, but I'm guessing a lot of our area is going to be water or close to water.
Yeah, some of the
So,
areas were close to water for sure. The all along Dodds Creek, for example, along the wetland at Erickson, and possibly there is a wetland attached to Dodds Creek. We don't know if it's in there.
So we're really chasing our tail a little bit here if we don't even know if we have a chemical that can kill it.
Oh, there's
And
definitely herbicides already been herbicided. And
Next,
it
close to
required
water though?
herbicide. No, not close to water. That's where the manual control comes into effect. You can dig it out, you can top it, or you can solarize it. Yeah. So that, of course, that's always the concern when things get into riparian habitat, is that you can no longer use herbicides. So then it comes down to manual control, which is why we always want to prioritize stopping the spread of invasive plants into riparian habitat. But there has been quite a bit of work that has been done at the Erickson wetland, and it has been successful. It's just that it requires, several years of work in order to knock it back fully because of the seed bank.
Dean, your turn.
Yeah, you mentioned the Department of Transportation there. A lot of our weeds are being spread around this valley by the gravel pits and the guys sanding all winter and stuff like that. They need to stop that. They gotta start treating the source of the infection. So
Yeah,
what
so
work are you doing towards that?
They do treat the gravel pits. If there is, if you know of a situation where you feel like it has not been done adequately, if you can specifically tell us, then we can follow up on it. And I believe that that is something that we wanted to do as part, because we've heard this before, for sure. And that's part of our work with the regional district, is trying to get these issues onto the table and getting some coordination money in order to even address this problem. We do have a contract with Modi, but we do have very limited funds with them. So we haven't been able to get to everything. Specifically with the gravel pits, I do know they're definitely treating gravel pits. Whether they are treating all gravel pits effectively, that could be a question, or it could not be their gravel pit, it could be somebody else's gravel pit. And we did have that come up with blueweed, and we did follow up with that. That was the, oh my goodness, the Wendell Irrigation District. I believe that used to be a gravel pit that was operational before, and it had blueweed in it, and it was not being treated, but it is no longer being used as a gravel pit. But yeah, for sure, if you have specific problems that we can follow up on, totally reach out to us.
My turn. Back to Ministry of Highway stuff. How much, like, to me, like where I'm at out in Lister, one of the big things getting to be out there is this chicory, or whatever else you want to call that, and how that stuff is spreading like crazy lately from the roadsides, and it gets into the field and on the lawn and in the garden and in the pasture and everywhere else. And by the time highways guys come by and mow the grass and weeds and stuff on the ditches, stuff's 6 feet high and seeding out, and it's just spreading it like crazy. And it's like, there's a big thing, like, is anybody doing anything with this stuff? Like, it's ridiculous.
Well, chicory is a low priority, so they won't be treating it specifically. But
Awesome.
of the things that they have done elsewhere, and that is another thing that we wanted to potentially pursue, was that they do have a good neighbor program that they have done in other regions. They haven't done it in this region just because it hasn't been addressed yet with them, but that is on our list. And I think that we did want to have Modi come to the next regional invasive species working group to discuss that and the potential for a better program for the Creston area specifically. So we are slowly moving towards that, but we might need your help with that when it comes down to it for feedback and support.
So you don't work very closely with MOE regarding weed cutting of the roads and timing?
No, we don't.
That's what we struggle with here. We brought it up to our ZCK for many years of getting the contractors to actually cut the weeds when they need to be cut. And some years they get on it and they're really early, but then they don't cut them again. And then the second bloom happens and we're basically wasting our time. There has to be some dialogue to actually make sure that they're cut more than once a year and at the right timing. Chicory, I know, is a low priority because it's gotten away with from us, pretty much like knapweed. But at the same time, if we're going to look at gravel pits, then we also need to look at the side of the roads that they've already seeded for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And it also, to me, comes to mind that this weed inspector would be a very good thing for us to have that we've been fighting to get since ever. Can this individual not also be part of the education process? You guys love to educate, and it is a good thing to educate. Can we not wrap up a couple jobs into the education as well as the enforcement side of things?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So that is something that is on our docket. When we talk to Moti again, as part, I think it's going to go under the Regional Invasive Species Working Group now. That discussion will happen with Moti. And so that is something, Kelly's taking notes, right? We'll bring that up with them at that point.
Is Director Kelly online?
No, that's your assistant, isn't it? Laurie, you're talking about?
No.
Kelly.
Chair,
Director.
the chair is Director
Chair.
Kelly is the chair.
Yeah.
He's not.
Oh, sorry, Vandenberg. Okay. He's not in the room today.
Oh, he's not in the room. I thought he was
No,
on.
that's where we wanted someone else.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah, so
We'll
Director Vandenberg.
we'll give him a hard time over that.
Okay, so I will take notes for him. I will take notes for him.
So I think part of the picture though too with MOTI is that their funding needs to double or triple. I mean, I think there's gotta be pressure put on them because that is the main source of weeds. I mean, it's drug along with equipment, with vehicles, with the gravel, everything, it all comes, but that's the first thing anybody sees when they drive in the valley. Oh gee, look at those wonderful weeds on the side of the road. You drive in Alberta, do you see that? Do you see weeds on the side of the road in Alberta? See, they care about the countryside out there. Doesn't seem like we do very much here.
No, I mean, it's a huge problem. It's definitely a huge problem. Has the commission ever reached out to Moti directly?
No.
I have because of all the complaints about the weeds.
Yeah.
But it's not just the ministry. The ministry is a contractor with a set of specifications, which they don't always meet. I've heard many times, oh, they're waiting for parts for the mower. I've said, throw it in the ditch, scrap it, get a new mower. We keep hearing year after year why they're behind on mowing and the weeds get taller. It's a nuisance for public on bicycles and walking. It's a hazard on passing zones. I could give you maps where you couldn't see where there's a bit of a curve or deflection. You couldn't see the car along the zone that's dotted line. Safety issues, all kind of issues have been brought up in addition to weeds. The contract for the maintenance needs to be more firm. It needs to say 2 cuts a year and here's the timing. And then the contractors have to be held to compliance. Because Moti doesn't cut anything. They just
No,
have
it's-
oversight periodically over a contractor that didn't plow the road I drove on today, for example, at Cerdar.
Oh, you
Yeah, I
did
think
your
it's
spot
for us,
on
it's
again?
IRB.
That's good.
Lucky you.
Well, see, sometimes too, like you say about the two cuts a year. And sometimes out our way anyway, the second cut is when they go by with the grader in the wintertime snow plow, and that's when the weeds get chopped off.
You got some
Honestly.
plot too?
Occasionally, we did today.
I
They got inches, no, they got plowed, yeah,
I
anyway.
think the spec, Chair, is 10 to 12 inches for the 2 feet of shoulder maximum height. They might have to cut 5 times a year places, but there's a specification for the height. Should certainly, anyway, the problem is multi-pronged. I'm getting a little bit off track here, but we need the pressure on several fronts. Because
Yeah.
it's not just an issue for weeds, it's an issue for safety.
Right,
Well, see, and then the other thing that comes, I would bring it back around to with some of these plants, and like Horiolisimo, I'll go there with that one. That stuff gets in the hay, which is a big thing in this valley, is hay. And my market is the horse people over in the West Coonies. They know all about Horiolisimo over there. And God heaven help you if you happen to have, if they would find some in my hay, that'd be the end of us. And, you know, that's not good. And, they already know, like, Grand Forks and over that country, they're bad with Horiolisum over there, so nobody gets their hay over there. And we sure don't want it to get like that over here, because that would be huge to this valley too. So there's gotta be control.
right. It would be good for me to grasp how widespread an issue that is and what the community would like to see happen. I mean, I know they were been looking at hay certification at the provincial level, and they haven't had a lot of movement on that. But is that something that you would be interested in?
I don't think we need a hay certification, like, see, I don't know, personally, I don't think we do anyways. I suppose those that are doing, so there again, I suppose the detail, or the specifications are different, like for those that are doing export hay to Europe or Asia, or that's all already there, yeah. But for those of us that aren't in that sort of market, but like I say, when you know it's toxic to horses especially. But there again, you know, we're doing our due diligence to make sure we, you know, if you see it, you get rid of it. And it's that it doesn't get a foothold in our places and stuff, so I don't think certification is gonna help that, because, you know, it comes down to your reputation in a lot of cases.
How did the hemlock get to the top of their priority list right now? What arrived Seekers to decide that this was something they needed to look at?
I think, okay, there's several reasons for that. One, because it's still at a low enough concentration that we could eradicate it. Secondly, because it is such a high health concern. Safety-wise, it's extremely toxic. Extremely toxic. Because it would impact hay marketability, a horrible word again, as well as it being toxic to livestock. It's kind of a double whammy. It's also in riparian areas. So it's just having such a widespread impact, but it's at the point where we can still do something about it. Unlike, as you know, many species like chicory and knapweed, although knapweed has biocontrol on it right now. Which it's not that those species are not priorities anymore. It's just that they've gone to the point where we can't do anything about it. So they've been downgraded, like burdock. I did have a farmer who was very concerned about burdock in her hay fields that was spreading from Crown land. But burdock isn't being treated right now because it's just too widespread. So
That's gonna make it better.
yeah.
That's
So the
just sounds like
management
giving up.
priority is, yeah, we've just basically given up because there's enough money for it. So we do, the priority of how we manage things is always, can we get rid of that species? So that would be the priority species for management. And then it just goes down from there. And then species that are, quote, low priority are ones that we only manage in special areas if there's sensitive habitat and that area is being managed specifically, but we don't manage it on a landscape like burdock.
Randy, just know there's a question online.
Yeah, I was just going there, yeah. Sadie has a question, go ahead.
Hi, I'm actually gonna just read out a question that a member of the public posted in the chat. They said, I empathize and clearly understand the harms of some weeds to animals and people. I also understand that many people are getting away from pharmaceuticals and turning more towards original first medicines and making their own for health and safety. Many weeds are actually food and medicines for residents and First Nations. How do you balance this responsibility?
Well, for those species, we do recommend that if they're grown, that they're controlled. That's the key thing, right? So burdock, for example, is a great example of that, and people harvest burdock. But if you are going to harvest it, you also just have to make sure that it doesn't go to seed, because it's the birds that cause so many problems, and they can kill wildlife, birds, bats, turtles. Oh, those are spotted knotweed, sorry. So, of course, a lot of these plants were brought over for medicinal reasons, and the problem is that we've just lost the relationship with those plants, and the people that brought them over, then the next people that took the property, they are not harvesting it anymore, and then it escapes and gets into the landscape. So it's not that you can't have those species, it's just that you then have to be responsible for them, and you have to responsibly harvest and make sure it doesn't go to seed and doesn't spread outside of your garden.
Thanks for answering that. I'll let you know if any more follow-up comes in the chat.
Be great, thanks.
Roger, go ahead.
Just a question, maybe Gary knows this, I have an understanding that the RDCK does not have weed bylaw. The East
That is
Kootenai
correct.
adopted the weed bylaw
Yeah.
about 4 or 5 years ago.
Longer than that, maybe 10 years ago or more. You would remember when we talked about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Weed Act is law, but then they have to, I guess, somehow work that into their own black and white papers in order to uphold it.
So a bylaw officer could deal with it, is that?
Yeah, the law is already there.
Yeah, but we do not have a bylaw in the Central Kootenays.
No,
No,
you don't
we
have a bylaw, no, but you need the right expertise as well. So I think the idea of the inspector is somebody who's very specialized. Whereas our bylaw officers are, very diverse in what they're doing. We don't have an excess of bylaw officers. Also, if you're gonna have an inspector, and if you create a bylaw, we can create it for the entire regional district or for a smaller service area. I don't see the point in necessarily trying to create one person's position to go from here to Edgewood, north and the cusp, top of the lake, wherever, like, it'd make more sense to have a bylaw with a service area for the valley, Creston Valley, and see how that worked.
Well,
Cause otherwise, this person's just driving around all the time. So, it's gotta be contained, I would think, to the area where you're actually gonna try and get results.
So it's a provincial responsibility,
It's a provincial act
it's a provincial act. but
that they
there-
would be happily downloading on us, just like, you wanna name a couple more acts and we'll tick the box, yes or no, has it been downloaded? Probably yes.
This is definitely one of them.
With our GDP and what it is in our valley, I agree with you, Gary, that we need, if we were to get one, that he would be localized and not going up to Timbuktu where their GDP of agriculture is $20,000. I think everyone has to really look back, take a step back and have a look at their budgeting and say, what are we doing here? Enforcement, I know we're lacking in every direction. But, without it having some teeth, we're chasing our tail, and we've spent a long time chasing our tail.
But also too, like, to the area, hay is the number 3 export behind, cherries, right? So it has to be, should be an important factor.
Significant.
Province maintaining the export quality and maintaining these
There's
access to markets, even if it is just going to the West Kootenai, because there's federal regulation in place on exporting grain out of Creston because of dwarf bud that's in the soil, but that's all controlled as well federally. Even if you wanna grow grain here and send it to Nelson, you're not allowed unless it's processed. So there should be money put forward by the province to look after it.
Chair, can we ask Nelson, when you were in the Okanagan, did they have inspectors for weed control? Or was it just not a thing anymore because everything's more intensive agriculture there.
If they did, I wasn't familiar enough with
You,
it.
okay,
In
you
my,
didn't overlap.
in my time, liaising as a liaison to the Ag Advisory Commission there, it never came up as a topic.
So we
When I
have,
was in the East Kootenays, though,
we have,
I should say that I worked for a small local government, and their bylaw officer would enforce, like there was a ticketing mechanism, and I know he dealt with issues of invasives within their boundaries of that local government.
To work with the town of.
Yeah, that's right.
or district municipality, I mean, they're a little bigger.
Well, I was working for Sparwood specifically, but I think that
It's, oh, it's
it
not-
was a lot of it was a huge geographic area, but most of it is mine sites. So, it was more in town that person was issuing tickets.
But the mindset would be what federal.
It was, yeah, well, I guess managed by the Ministry of Mines, tackle, yeah. But I think Lori pointed this out too, a lot of the issues were along the railway. So, yeah, there's challenges there.
Something that you might want to consider would be writing a letter from the commission to the RDCK and or MOTI, or, I mean, it would be great for me to have a list of your concerns that I can bring forward. Also, if at the next regional invasive species working group meeting, we did want to have MOTI appear. So we could open up the meeting to members of the commission to attend to that meeting as well, to have that conversation with MOTI. But since we are bringing these recommendations to the RDCK in March, at their next March meeting, which I think is around the 19th, letters of support are hugely valued. So this is the first time we've really been making headway with RDCK with addressing agricultural concerns. So this is a good opportunity to reach.
Are you able to look into what other districts are doing and how they're funding their inspection? I know into the Caribou, most northern around Williams Lake, and in that jurisdiction, they have very active weed inspectors. Whether you could reach out to the other groups and see how they're funding it, or whether our directors can do that, I don't know who can get to where it needs to be.
I think that's a good question.
Because Lori, earlier you mentioned Columbia Shoe Spa Regional District, but if I noted correctly, the money they got from the province was more for outreach and not enforcement. Was that correct?
No, it's for enforcement.
Okay,
They are not choosing, the regional district is not choosing to enforce.
I see, okay.
Yeah, they are choosing to do more outreach. But they could, if they so chose to. But I can ask around to find more information about the weed inspectors.
So where is the nearest weed inspector from here?
Well, we don't have anyone involved.
Yeah,
anyone to go to look for that. There we go.
Yeah, but like,
I guess that brings, sorry, Mr. Chair, that brings up to, I guess, the next question of contractors. Who currently do you have for contractors or in the coming spring season?
for herbicide contractors,
Yes.
it's Alan Freeborn with Kootenai Weed Control is our main contractor. And we are having huge difficulties with that. The capacity is not there. It's a province-wide issue. And we're gonna try and talk to the province about this because it's like we can't solve it on our own. But it's just how to get people to get into this business.
Well,
We're
put some more
struggling.
red tape. We can't even buy mouse poison anymore, so.
Gotta be taken.
Lunch, eh?
Is Alan still currently on your board?
If you get it from.
If you
So
have
in
any
other-
ideas, we're
So in other words, there isn't gonna be any weeds being sprayed then?
Well, I mean, Alan sprays, but last time I seen him, I think he's kind of wanting to retire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. I think people are just not interested in taking that on as a career. It's seasonal, so it's hard to keep the business going. There's a heavy outlay for equipment.
Lori, you recall, I'm not gonna bring up her past because the past is her past, but you've got 3 beef growers members sitting here in front of us. And, we really struggle with this. As you know, the past is the past, but we gotta give our heads a big shake here.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
that
pretty,
is,
it's pretty brutal.
yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
yeah, I mean, there's the difference between spraying on private property is one thing. Spraying on crown land is another, because there's a whole pile of regulations that need to be followed. And so that's where the issues is with that. And part of our issues with companies is making sure all those rules are followed. There is a problem with that because it takes it up to the next level. For running the company is making sure that all of those specifications are met. So that is one of the issues. Yeah. It's proper training. It's proper training is what it comes down to. And it takes a lot of, if the herbicide contractors are not properly trained, it creates just massive problems in our end with the ministry, and also just a lot of our time with trying to train people. So yeah, some outlays have got to happen with the training portion as well.
You guys have to take a long, hard look at your contracts of actually, East Kootenai will give their applicators multi-year contracts, so they know what they're doing. They know that they can buy equipment. They know that they can have employees. But for whatever reason, in the east,
Yeah.
they don't know whether they even have a contract next year. So as an entrepreneur, I'm certainly not going to even look to go down that road. If I don't know, I mean, and
Yeah.
I know you guys don't, for whatever reason, your guys' funding is yearly, but yet in the east, they can basically guarantee their contractor 5-year contract or a 3-year contract. So I don't know where the disconnect between east and west is happening.
I've never heard of that, so I would love to know that.
It's been brought up a few times, Lori, maybe not to you directly,
No,
but
no,
to Seacrest
Yeah.
many times.
Is that who,
Yeah.
funding it?
No,
because our funding, because for sure our funding is annual. We don't even know if we're ever going to get funds every year. It's completely last minute. So we have zero capacity. I mean, we are on the same issue with multi-year funding. It affects us in the same way. So if the East Kootenai is doing it in a different way, I would definitely be interested in knowing that, because my understanding is annual from the ministries.
somehow they're able to control, to know that they're gonna have enough funding to support the multi-year. I'm guessing that I'm assuming that they're guessing a little bit as to that they're gonna get the MOTI and they're going to get forestry funding. But at the same time, their contractor there has multi-units going out. I mean, he's got, I believe, he's got 3 spray units fully accrued going from the day he can start to the day he's done.
You don't know the name of the herbicide contractor, do you?
But it's in my phone. I can't think of it offhand,
Okay, I'm sure we could find out somehow.
but yeah, it shouldn't be hard to get.
But that's a really great point that should be included into the conversation. I mean, this conversation just has to happen at the ministry level. Like, everybody just needs to figure something out.
Shouldn't be trying to reinvent the wheel in every different area.
No,
If the East Kootenai's got a good program, we should be finding out what that is and follow that same program, I would say.
I agree with you on that one. I mean, go ahead.
Seems to me like, I don't know how to put it quite, but with all the agriculture in this valley, in this area, and what that generates, it's gotta have priority on this stuff. Like seriously, I don't care who's doing it or who's funding it. It's gotta happen because otherwise we're gonna lose out big time around here, and that is unacceptable. And it's like, somebody better get their act together. In a nutshell, right? Right.
Frustration is building on our end, as you can hear.
Yeah, well, trust me, I'm in the same spot. I mean, the work with the regional district, a lot of that came out of the concerns from Creston Valley. And we are slowly making headway, but.
The turtle won the race on that one.
Pardon?
The turtle won the race on that one.
Yeah, totally. We're in our third year now with our DCK, and they have been receptive, but again, it's education and convincing directors that this is actually a really big problem. There's still resistance on the board. And from our perspective, what we really need is the service area bylaw, because there isn't an invasive species program at the regional district level. When we're and we're begging for money, that's where it's at. So unless we have a secure source of funding for this type of coordination to happen, it's just not going to happen. So that's, sorry,
what was your 2023 budget?
Our budget for CECAS?
Yes.
It was 950, and a lot of that, I'd say 2/3 of that is the operations program, which is a fee for service program, and MODI and MOF contracts. The rest is zebra quagga mussel monitoring, and then education, which comes from grants.
So none of that in that conversation you just said had anything to do with killing them.
The whole operations program is surveying, control, the organization of the herbicide contracts. We hire 4 summer students to do surveys and manual control, and then monitoring. That's what that program is.
And how many contractors did you contract to for spraying? Just Alan? Just Alan?
I don't know that answer because that's not what I manage. We had 26 funders for that program. And
no, for the spraying, for your contractors.
I'm
one contractor?
Sorry. Oh, we have, yes, the Kootenai weed control, and then there's Martin Brazo as well. He's just started with us. Then there's Morrow Bioscience, but I think they are having capacity issues, so I don't even know if they're on the docket this year.
Now, to put you a little bit on the spot, do you know how much you spent on control, taking everything out?
Well, control specifically with just herbicide spraying as opposed to like the whole program?
Control of weeds, noxious weeds, not mussels or all your other under your umbrella.
No, I can't break it. I would have to look at that to break it down for that specific section of it.
Could you get back to us on that, please?
Sure. Yeah, that's all based on who we have contracts with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just want to know the numbers.
You want to know for all the funders or specifically for Ministry of Forests?
I'm sure all of us here as who we are, just want to know how much you had given out of your budget to spray noxious weeds, road right-of-ways, etc.
Okay, because they're going to be different numbers depending on who's funding it, right? Because there's
I just in a total, how much did Alan get? How much did your other contractors get?
Okay.
Dean?
I see what you're saying.
I'm gonna give her a minute to catch up on her paperwork.
Okay.
What about biological control?
There's,
We done much work on that. We did hound's tongue on our farm, developing
Yeah.
bugs. And that was quite successful.
yeah,
So there's gotta be other bugs out there for some of this stuff, and why can't we get them? And, a friend of mine tried to buy some himself, he wasn't allowed, it had to go through a big group. And he wanted to control certain sites on his farm. We should be allowed access to this stuff, right?
yeah, that is regulated by the province. And yeah, our hands are tied on that.
I
That's,
wanted to keep that hound's tongue thing going, and they wouldn't allow me.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think
we developed,
they
it
were
was
having-
developed here on my farm.
I'm not exactly sure what happened, if they just suddenly had capacity issues, but they kind of shut that program down for a year. Hopefully they're up and running again and they're taking biocontrol requests, but yeah, it just seems to me like it started up again.
Cause that bug, it really worked. It did its job and then some.
Hound's tongue is coming back, is it not now?
Probably because there's nothing to keep it going. You gotta keep the bugs going somewhere, right?
Well, that's the thing, it'd be a cycle, right? So if the bugs do a good job, then they don't have any food, so the bugs die. And then the weed comes back, but now
That's where you have to keep propagating, keep doing it to keep it going. Keep a feed source.
Just don't kill the weeds.
we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I can find out what's happening more with the biocontrol program.
That would be our local virologist. Its name. I can see it, but I can't put it, anyway, he should be up to date on that.
Yeah. Okay, anything else, or shall we move on?
Let's move, it's gonna be a long day, let's move on.
Good. Okay, so yeah, it definitely looks like there needs to be more dialogue at all levels with this stuff, and like I say, it looks, and the flip side of that is it looks like there's not much weeds getting sprayed, so it's gonna be a problem that isn't gonna go away, and everybody's gonna have to work on this, and some level of bureaucracy has gotta figure this out to make it happen, because we can't let the weeds keep going, it's just ridiculous, so. Anyways, with that, thank you for your presentation and answering all the questions, and I guess
Thank you.
we'll carry on.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks, Laurie.
Okay, bye.
Hey. Next on the agenda, bit of a recap from the provincial workshop for agriculture advisory commissions. I got to participate in that because I'm a chair. We could do these things. One of the things, pass those down. You got one?
I go.
You got one? You got one?
You are there.
Okay, you get ready for it. Yeah, I found this.
You good, Leno? Randy?
Yeah. I found this workshop quite interesting.
Randy, can you pass them down?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Hold it.
You ready? Oh, I got. Right, that's all.
Oh, I didn't,
That's all I got left, yeah.
It's the one in the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in, yeah. Yeah, 'cause I saw, yeah, it was the same place, but I was. Yeah.
And quick question, Randy, did staff get to go as well? Like, I wasn't sure if Sadie or
Sadie was signed into it and so was
Dana?
Dana, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So apparently they've been doing these provincial workshops for like 10 years. This was the first I'd heard of it, but pointed out to us anyway. So like I say, it was kind of like a real new thing. But, and on, of course, it was all this Zoomy thing, and there was like, at one point, there was 84 people on this thing around the province. So that's a whack of people. And there is apparently 34 or 38 AACs around the province. So that's pretty impressive. That's a lot of groups. And I got notes here somewhere. And we had input from Ministry of Agriculture, a few people, a couple of people from the Agriculture Land Commission, including the chair. And so they talked to us and so on, and like Jennifer Dyson, the ALC chair, she was first up, I guess. She was saying too about how they really appreciate the AACs around the province, and it's important for them in government that we at the ground level are given our opinions and observations and stuff like that, and we're independent from government and so on. So one thing, like I said, there's 4.9% of the province's land is in the ALR, and half of that is crown land or other infrastructure. I thought, I'd never heard that one before. It was like, that's a lot of ground that is like the crown or whatever else that they do it. And 51% of the ALR land is 10-acre parcels or smaller. I was surprised at that too, that there's that much of it, that's that little. So even if we have some of these smaller lots that we deal with, apparently they all count, you know, in the grand scheme of things. So even if it looks like it's not worth much to agriculture, potential, it is still there to be a viable thing or an important piece of development. I went through some of the AAC roles and responsibilities, and that's where this term of long-term of reference page came in. So it's sort of, you know, the idea being sort of what we can and can't do, and you know, what the whole purpose of the AACs are. And I figure it's a good idea to review these occasionally and so forth, and also what meeting procedures should be and stuff like that. And one of the things in there too, and I highlighted it, was what the effectiveness of noxious insect and weed control regulations and programs. And sort of like, we can see from what we just went, that there is no effectiveness to these programs, so that's definitely needs to be worked on somewhere in the system. And as far as, say, further down about, you know, what we can comment on and stuff, about, you know, the potential of what these properties are for agriculture, and also what these proposals can affect surrounding properties and stuff, which is another one that I don't know if we've ran into it very often, but sometimes it does make a difference as to what's beside it and so on. Anyways, the rest of it you can read yourself and so on, but a lot of good information on that part of it, I thought. One thing Jennifer also brought up was under their best practices or whatever, was that in respect to our AAC members, is that meeting times and days and so on reflect our farming schedules. You know, that is a big one for all of us guys, because, you know, like, I know now with the more formalities that have evolved with all of this, you know, they want a set day further than sooner, sort of thing, so they can get it on the line and set up yada yada, all these things. And it's like a lot of days, like I say, you know, it's pretty hard to know what our schedules are going to be. I mean, sometimes we have a plan for the day or what we're doing or for the next few days, and you go out the door, it all changes like right now. And so it is very difficult for a lot of us to figure out what our day is going to be for a meeting, you know, 10 days or 2 weeks from now. And that is difficult. And it says, won't matter who who you're dealing with agriculture, you're gonna run into that with everybody. It doesn't matter what the commodity is or what we do. One thing too that was mentioned is about, like, some of the stuff, like what we're doing is more of a reactive thing, like say when we deal with these applications and so on, sort of reacting to what comes in, but we should also have opportunity to be proactive on issues. You know, and maybe that's where this weed thing comes in too, if we gotta maybe push harder and get our voice out there harder that this has gotta get done, you know, it's gotta get fixed, so. It's good that we have an effective relationship with the regional boards. So there's one too, and so on that I think we've gotta, most of the time I think we're pretty good, but I think we've gotta work on that too. One of the other speakers was from the Farm Industry Review Board, FIRB. And I've heard of this board before, but I hadn't, you know, I didn't really know what they're about or so on, but apparently what part of, or most of what they do, or some of what they do, is dealing with complaints of be it your neighbors or whatever of the farm practices that are going on or not going on, and things that aren't right. And yet still, you know, we have the right to farm legislation. So, which will protect the farmers from undue complaints and erroneous complaints and such. But there are occasions locally where, say the next door neighbors or Joe down the road, whatever, and what they're doing or not doing on their places affects the farmers surrounding them. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I think it's for some members of the community that they could look into or should look into what maybe this board can do for people that aren't farming properly on their places. And I think maybe there is some possibilities there, and I'm not sure what they've got. Like they will look, you know, if it's a legitimate complaint, this board will look into it and so on, and it sounds like they've got enforcement powers that they can levy fines or whatever too. And like I said, I don't know the detail on that, but the concept or what it sounds like, it looks like it could be a valuable tool for some people that figure they can just do whatever, whether it's right or it's wrong.
Do they have members from across the province?
That I don't know. I'm saying, you have something, I could have to look them up and see what they, you know, the details of it and so on, but anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that I didn't really know about.
Are they're volunteers? Or is it
I don't think so. I think it's
paid?
yeah.
Be interesting to see where they're sourcing their dollars from.
Do any of our directors and stuff, you guys familiar with that at all, or?
No. The review board.
Anything? No?
Is it the ALC that is in?
No.
No.
It's an industry.
It's a separate board, yeah.
What's it called? AF?
Farm industry.
Farm Industry Review Board, FIRB. Anyways, you know, it might be a useful tool for certain things that do come up along the way. I was surprised too at a lot of the AACs that are from around like Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Richmond, Delta, and all around the lower mainland down there. And yeah, I'm always, I guess, of the vision that most of it's sort of out there further, and some of this to me sounds like it's closer into the rural urban areas and stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of that down there, and boy, the stuff that they have to fight with and deal with is gonna be just insane with the population and all the people that they gotta deal with down there, so that was kind of interesting. At the time too, because the word was just starting to come out about the Land Act amendments that were coming up to common knowledge. And so somebody was asking them what the ag minister people, what they thought of it and so on. Of course, this was on I think it was on a Tuesday. And they were all like deer in the headlights kind of thing. It's like they heard about it the Friday before and they didn't have a clue as to what was coming down or what was going on either right there. So, so that was kind of interesting too, that, you know, the people in the ministry didn't even know what was coming on, so. Anyways, of course, since then, government has backed off on pushing their amendments through and so on, so we'll see where that goes somewhere down the way. And that's probably about the gist of most of it. They said, in 2022, agriculture contributed just about $4.7 billion to the BC economy. Well, that's a pretty good chunk of change. And that's about it for that.
That was a loss for producers.
Yeah.
At 4.7 billion.
Now, we've got a couple of things left. What can we do with, and I'll put this to the directors at this point, just to see how we approach it. Pertaining to a couple of previous referral applications that we dealt with last year. Like I say, we haven't had a meeting since August, so this is kind of maybe catching up. Where in the, I won't mention names at this point, I don't think I need to. Where not necessarily that they've gotten through their full resolutions or whatever they may or they may not have. But in the meantime, since the meetings at this level have been had, it seems like the I don't know if non-compliance is the right words to use, but I'll use that for now. As to what's going on these properties seems to continue. And is there anything that we can do about that or revisit them or what? Because so far what we're seeing, just driving by, is like nothing's been solved on these two properties. So I'll defer to you gentlemen and can fill us in as to what we can or can't do or can or can't say about it, because so far it doesn't look very good. Go ahead, Gary.
Well, one thought I have is, I mean, it's an honest question. If somebody has an application in, sometimes they're already underway. So it's an honest question. Did they stop? Are they patiently waiting for full approvals, or are they still doing something, or what level of activity might be ongoing? And I can see where you guys be in the dark. So that just kind of comes to the overall question of compliance and enforcement. Who is watching what and at what stage? We know in building inspection, if you start a building and you're tagged, well, you didn't get a permit, someone will be checking up on it routinely to make sure that you stopped work until you do get a permit. Maybe. To be honest, well, that you are reminded to stop work, even though you don't have a permit. Like there's a follow-up process. So to be honest, I don't know what the follow-up process would be for development applications, variances or the like that are in stream, maybe not approved, or they're with the ALC. Whether or not anybody's having a look to see what is happening there. So as a commission, and I don't know if well, the one thing you can ask is for a bit of a session, education bit, maybe next meeting on what is the regional district's practice, if there's something, or are we following up, or are we just waiting? And we talked about this earlier, they tripled from one compliance and enforcement officer for the interior for the land commission to 3, I think they have now, but what are they doing? And when they have an application, are they waiting for a desktop exercise? Or are they actually going out and having a look right away? Right. Can you be notified that they've had somebody from their branch actually come out, have a look and sort of be in the mix? And we talked about this sitting in Cranbrook I don't know, half a dozen or 8 years ago. Well, whenever Jennifer Dyson just started, it was just after she came in. And we talked about the better exchange of information and communication. So I think it's a fair question. Are we communicating with our compliance officers? Are we following up if some of these take a year or two to go through the steps? Yeah, so I just throw that out there as I think is a good question. And I would imagine someone from the ELS would be happy to join you on Zoom.
Okay.
The other thing that comes up is, I'll leave that part there for now. I'll just leave that part there for now.
So I know like the one, and then we looked at that last year in the spring. And apparently it's gone through all the regional board and it's probably, it seems like it is in ALC jurisdiction now. But like I said, that's coming up to a year. And it's like, looks like there's nothing happening there. Meantime, the sprawl, shall we say, which shouldn't be allowable, acceptable, is getting bigger. And that doesn't seem right. And the other one that we dealt with last summer, where there was a variance given where the footprint of the house was supposed to move. Apparently it didn't, and the house is there. So that one brings me up as like, okay, how did that not change? And the applicant was agreeing to this move, and it didn't seem to happen. And then there's other issues with that property as well, but I don't think we need to go there right now on that one. But there again, so that there again, it's another one is like, what kind of enforcement or where in the paper trail of permits and stuff that get to go through without being noticed. And of course now it's there, so what are you gonna do about it? Probably not much, but.
So maybe I will make a little bit more of my comments now then that, as directors, we observe stuff and we'll bring items up to staff's attention. Some, whether it comes to us directly or we just happen to see it off and it's referred through someone else. And there is one thing that when something is in our bylaw officer's purview, we just step back. Like I can name probably off the top of my head a dozen situations where somebody did something they shouldn't have done, but we don't try and follow up. That's different because I'm hit and miss. Like there's so many things coming at us, but you guys are specialized. And so that's where it would be a little bit unusual for you to have any information as to what the subsequent steps are if something's in non-compliance with our system. Because normally it's sort of becomes a private issue between the individual and non-compliance and the enforcement officer.
Yeah.
The other side of it though, and this is where I bring up like Jennifer Dyson, they proposed what I would call like an eye in the sky tool some years ago, and it had huge pushback. They had proposed a contract that they're gonna use satellite imagery and sophisticated computer analysis to look for changes, incremental changes.
I remember hearing about that.
And when it hit the 6 o'clock news, they said, oh, we're not doing that. But I think it's an honest question because I'd be surprised if they're not doing some of that. Like right now, I had it open, I guess, Dale, you would have seen, I had the RDCK map open for a little while there. You can go through and look at orthoimagery from 1999 maybe, or well, maybe 2005 and then 2008 and 2014 and 2018. You can do a comparison in orthoimagery on our mapping system. Not everywhere, depends when the LiDAR was flown and what was brought in. But it's an honest question, I think, for the Agricultural Land Commission. What tool are they using now? Because they admitted they have a vast territory. And kind of the eye in the sky approach is their best tool. And so if something is flagged or it's in progress or someone started without permission, you would hope if they don't go see it on the ground, at least they would have flagged it with some, aerial photographs. So I think those are good questions to ask. What are they able to share? Because they'll be similar, I'm sure, that you don't want to get it, say something goes to court, you don't want to be in the middle of that. And what are we able to share in terms of compliance and enforcement? And maybe part of that conversation would be justifiably closed, because there could be a legal aspect around how much information do you need to have to do what you do effectively, to understand what happens in, the bigger scale. So I don't know if a closed session would even be merited for this group, if we're gonna talk about the detail or sharing of information of what the limitations are, kind of like the legal advice side. But they're good questions, because you wanna make sure that the recommendations you're making, if they're serious concerns and you don't see you don't see the results happening that you think need to happen, maybe not your fault, but maybe some other information, some other detailed explanation, just a little more emphasis put in as it goes through this system as to why it matters so much. And you won't know where things are going sideways unless you are told where they went sideways, and then you know where to say, well, no, we can't let it go sideways. We have to focus on that and fix it.
Yeah.
I think as all of us here is our frustration right now. Is that, we're taking our time to do all this, make the recommendations, and then we kind of get lost in the weeds. And we're still driving by said properties. It's not like it's something that came in one year and out the other and it's gone and it's in the bottom drawer of our desk. We drive by these places probably every day. And you look at it, and I'll speak for I reported a modular trailer going in, hooking to water, being fully renovated. I brought it to the attention of those that I needed to. It was immediately looked at. I know very well there's people living in said establishment, so I'm just wasting my time. And I think we all kind of feel like that when we're seeing still stuff continue, or in the one case where Randy was talking, where we made recommendations where we all voted and decided that if B was done, we were okay with it. Suddenly it stays back to A and the house is up. When we said, well, no, we said we were okay with it if this was done, and the homeowner was like, yeah, okay. So where did we get lost?
Can I comment a bit on that too? And personal observations here, and they go over a few years. And I'm gonna pick on area E, and actually I think
Where's area A?
area E wraps around Nelson, city of Nelson, sort of Balfour, Harrop Proctor, and then it runs around the south side of Nelson over to Taggart. Cause there's a lot of ag land there that is not gonna be farmed. It'll be a garden, bigger than the average garden. It won't be farmed. And we saw a lot of applications over the years where our staff said, no, there's the science, there's potential of farm, but as you cut these properties up and add another house, they never will be. And staff has made recommendations and we've overridden them as a committee and as a board. It's the sympathetic approach, like without maybe understanding, is there real ag value there? How do you hold on to that value? And I see the same in the Slocan. Well, this family just wants to cut 20 acres into 3 pieces because there's a son and a daughter and they all want to have a piece of land. So this is something you're up against, that then the board says, oh, that kind of makes sense. Without enough understanding as to, I guess we have an understanding in the back of our mind, but it's easier sometimes to say, well, it's just this one. And that happens a lot. And I won't ask Nelson or Sadie or anybody to comment on it. I've observed it over and over. I've been party to it. Sometimes they say this makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But for you guys to have the strength of your voice be more meaningful, maybe you really have to understand where things fall apart. So some of it's in that compassionate thing. Was just this one. This is where I say that, we can rely on the Rural Development Institute and others who've done all these surveys of how much ag land do we have, what's productive. You gave some interesting numbers, and that's partly why I opened a map. You talked about how much crown land is in ALR. A lot of it's in the north end of the lake. So say you had a decent winter and there wasn't too much snow and you get your crop in early enough, then how are you gonna get it anywhere? Like it's just, some of these locations, it's painful enough for you guys to get your product to market without being another 3-4 hours away each way. So it's, I think it's fair to ask, where are the key points where the ag land is being eroded? And you need to educate everybody, including guys like me, more specifically about the value and when not to choose A, when to go with B. And you're not gonna understand where it's going sideways until somebody just tells you. And the first answer might be it's the regional board that lets half of them go. And the next answer might be half of those, the commission says, oh, we don't care that much. You know, our provincial government once degraded our entire agricultural land base here, made it the secondary category, like, oh, do what you like almost. It's that bad. So I don't know, the compliance and enforcement workshop and whether part of it was closed, I think it'd be good. And then maybe what came out of a workshop like that, you need to get our colleagues on rural committee and board to listen to it.
Sometimes some of those trouble areas, like you mentioned, at the end of the lake, it's difficult to get a crop out. But I right away thought in my head, well, that land is probably reasonably priced. You know,
Yes.
For those that wanna start out farming, that might be where they have to start, and the only place they might even be able to farm.
And we know it produces crops.
Yeah,
And can produce.
6 foot. It's beautiful.
That's a good point.
And that's a lot of these. This compassion thing
All in
that you brought up is. Okay, let's say Bob and Sally, like you said, wanna make their 20 or their 30 acres into 3/10 for their kids, okay. I'm Bob beside that has 100 acres and go, yeah,
Divided by 10.
let's go chopping it up, cause I wanna retire. When I look at, and I think all of us typically look at these applicants going, okay, if we chose the side of going, yes, it's easy and it makes sense. What about the neighbor, the next neighbor, the other neighbor, the other neighbor? And it's a ball that's just starting to roll down the hill. And we're just undermining it to a point where, what are we all really doing? And that's where these little pieces, oh, it's just 5 acres under the bridge in Nelson. Okay, well, that's a pretty darn nice market garden.
So I've asked, under our previous head of the commission, that we work with them to create a small ag designation that would go beyond just it's in zoning, that they would actually voluntarily register very strict covenants against their own property. Now, we've moved a step towards what I talked about years ago because we now have the farm footprint. So you don't have the sprawling, the big 8,000 square foot mansion in the middle and little coach houses and a swimming pool around the perimeter. I think that was a good direction. It's got its pros and cons and we're receiving some criticism over it. But if someone really wanted to go below a certain threshold, you could say, okay, you're gonna register a covenant on your own property that says your house won't be bigger than 2,000 square feet and there is no second home and there is no this, there is no that, period. Like to develop a model, a template for a small farm lot that may be a great market garden lot. And it may be like 2 couples come to mind where they're leasing other property now because their little 1.5 or 2 acre garden did so well. And they found the niche market that now they're leasing 5 acres next door. One's over there and one's over there. And so there's gotta be a way to approach this that you can be a little compassionate for the young couple that thinks they're gonna work their hands off with a small market garden and make sure it never becomes anything but that. And if they have to move on, they sell it to the next young couple.
I guess that's something where I myself will look in the mirror and say, I don't fully understand the power that we really have or could have. I know in meetings, one meeting we had with you the last time, you brought up some options as who we are that we're able to do. And at this point, I still don't fully understand, some of the things that we can bring to the table and say, yes, okay, we would approve this, but you have to do that covenant. Or I'm unaware of some of these options. I'm guessing we all are.
I don't think it would have worked without Richard Bullock said he was interested in doing it back when. Cause it's gonna be the commission that has the final say in some of these subdivisions. And I don't like to think they're just being compassionate because we were as a board. But they would be more methodical and say, and he talked about this at length. He came and sat with us in Nelson for a whole day the one time and talked about it. About something that's a really strict, this is all you're gonna do in this land. You can't do whatever you want.
It's only a one and done sort of a situation,
Yeah.
right?
But
Okay,
then
this is the one.
Well, we would create maybe 2 or 3 templates for different sizes of small lot farming that would have a potential for being farmed 20 years from now. Instead of just one generation or the first 10 years, for the couple has given up on it, decided they'd rather work on a computer.
So like, let's say out of these two applications we had, one was approved, the variance was granted. So they go ahead and they just continue doing what they're doing, and then a final house inspection and gets noticed that the house is in the wrong spot.
That's a whole other department and you
But is
would.
that what we're saying?
Yeah, I don't know because we don't get updated on those bylaw
And then I go,
infractions.
oh, it's already here.
And what do we do now?
So yeah, like I say, to me that, when you see that sort of thing, it's like, okay, you don't snap the finger and all of a sudden there's the house. I mean, it took a while. And isn't there supposed with building permits, they gotta check the foundation and then they check the next level or whatever, right? I think, anyway, I haven't built nothing for a while. But it's like, nobody twigged to it, that it was supposed to be, So like I say, now once it's there, so you're not gonna move it. But like I say, this is the kind of thing, like, it's stuff that falls through the cracks in our eyes.
Creator.
And, I don't know I don't suppose we can do much about it, but there again, this is where we're supposed to be the eyes and ears on the ground. And yet I don't know if we're allowed to really say much or do much about it at for some of these things, and yet, what do you do? So, that's where some of our frustration comes in on stuff like that. And, and this other one with let's say the sprawl, where I'm at with that. And it seems to me there was I don't know if it's a suggestion or if it was a recommendation or whatever to be, that you'll get temporary non-farm use
Temporary use permit.
on that, and it should be moved or undone by December of 2028. And I saw that and it's like, so I mean, I don't know if this is an enforced thing or this is a suggestion for it going further up the ladder, I don't know. But I look at that and say, well, by the time you get to December of 2028, everybody that's probably currently on a board or in power probably isn't likely to be there. Nobody's gonna know the difference and it'll just carry on. Is my gut feeling, which that might be a little cynical, I don't know. But it's like, that doesn't sound like a solution. So, and, these two particular ones stood out to us and, like I say, I don't know if there's a solution or not, but we just wanted to air that out there and, just so that your level of stuff is aware.
I read one of the reports, one of them had a do not occupy, but I can't figure out why.
So,
There'd be no final inspection on the dwelling that is complete, safe for occupant to be.
I don't know if it was that one or if separate residence.
How many,
Cause it references one building on it, and then it says do not occupy. That's not the house being built.
site visits typically inspection has on an average house build?
There's 7 or 8 triggers where they're calling up for inspection. So the siding, the footings and bar in place prior to concrete placing, the perimeter drainage, the damp proofing prior, waterproofing prior to backfill, general framing inspection, plumbing rough-in inspection, electrical safety branch, of course. What am I missing here?
Septic vapor barrier.
Well, septic separate, yes, insulation and vapor, good man, insulation and vapor barrier up to 7. And then prior to, you could get instead of getting a final, you could get a conditional occupancy. So you may call 7 or 8 times. And we've talked about, but if, grooming that or changing that a little bit, but if someone doesn't call for that inspection, it doesn't happen. That's where you get to where you're talking about, because the onus is on the builder to call for the inspection.
see.
Because people move at different paces. You can't say, hey, I see you dug a hole, I'll be back next month and we'll see the concrete come in and I'll be back a month later and I'll see it framed. Doesn't happen in the goodies.
But if you don't call in for those things, no.
Then they're in, if they proceed without approval, they're in non-compliance. And as directors, we don't try and track every
No,
non-compliance.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, they're in non-compliance. You can do a forensic exercise. I'll share with you, I'm doing one now. It's many tens of thousands of dollars for this particular landowner to go back where they're non-compliance to modify part of the structure and structural engineer. I'm not doing it as regional district director as my as a builder and a designer, tens of thousands of dollars to do modification to work towards compliance. And in this particular case, it's worth doing. It's not a knockdown, it's a large structure, so. And that's something that none of us need the details on. You need the details on the bigger impact, I think, and be able to make sure we understand the bigger impact. So you put the level of explanation as to why you think it has to be B, not A, that maybe it carries all the way through with that recommendation, the strength of your recommendation. Not to fault you, it's just obviously not everybody's communicating on the same level.
Okay, I think that's a good summary or that or whatever, I don't know, I think. Anything to add, Nelson?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Should let you start, because you live and breathe this.
Well, no, for starters, like I said to you in the email on these two, and these are all, like, this is part of the public record, it was Rempel and Deschamps you asked about. Anytime, ask me questions, or I'll direct it to our staff to respond. It doesn't have to be in a meeting. We can share with you publicly, whatever's public. And which is what I would do and what I did in your email to you, Randy. Like, the first one was Rempel, that one's still under building permit. So, I guess, and I think you asked about your, I guess, authority as an advisory panel, like you're here to provide advice to the board, and the board chooses to do with that what they may. That advice is anywhere from support to non-support and everywhere in between. So that conditional support is one that is open to you, and I think maybe I'll get to that one when we talk about the Deschamps one, because that was a case there where the conditional support was what ended up going to the land commission. But back to Rempel, that one's under building permit application. So the expectation is whatever decision came out of that board decision, which is it was a variance decision, to say we would support it under these conditions, and you remember what they were. It was in a general location, and we tried to put a box around it as best we could. So the expectation is staff now administer that decision. It's out of your hands, it's out of the board's hands. Staff are now administering it, and they're honoring that decision by how they administer that. So they do so, in this case, it's building permit. So the building permit, we would review that particular issue at the siting stage. So we get drawings in that show where the house is to be located. Now, if I remember correctly, that person started, or there was foundation, they maybe got to a footing and foundation stage before.
It was dug, but
Yeah,
there was
that's
no.
So that, I think, complicated things, but whatever is public, we will share with you at any time.
Yeah,
But the point I'm making there is until that application is closed, I guess, as long as it's in process, we're still administering that decision of the board. So that's again something maybe for the board to follow up on. In your time, Gary, I don't know if that's ever happened where a decision was made and then perhaps the follow through didn't happen as it was supposed to. That's possible, but that would certainly be the expectation, is we administer it in accordance with the decision.
But those might be closed topics, that if anything comes to mind, they can't talk about, because
Yeah,
sometimes, because there could be a legal implication. So I wouldn't share with you any examples.
So that said property that where we made what we would have liked to see. The uppers gave what decision?
They changed, my understanding is they agreed with the changes.
That we, and then,
The
Are
applicant
we
himself,
talking about?
yeah,
the applicant himself said that
he was agreeable.
agreeable to that. It sure looks like it didn't move.
And again, I haven't been out to site, I'm not overseeing that, I'm just telling you the process at play. And so I guess we'll see what happens if it gets administered or not, but that's certainly the intention, is it gets administered in accordance with that.
What about the do not occupy on there?
Again, we might be getting into weeds that are out of the realm of this body or even my involvement. So anything that's dealing with enforcement is probably best to leave with our enforcement team.
So just to clarify for me, Nelson, so
It was online. Can't get information on.
Oh, if
It posted on.
maybe I didn't understand you.
On the regional district website, it says on the, I think August 29th, it says Atco trailer, do not occupy. But it
And-
doesn't give a
Are you referring to, what document are you referring to online?
The approval, I guess it was in one of the links that Sadie sent through to us last week
Maybe.
for decision.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's on the yeah, it's the link that's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Right, so that would be that's the public record of the decision that was made to approve that development variance permit.
But for the actual trailer, it says do not occupy. But we don't know why it wasn't.
I would guess that would probably be that they wouldn't, once that house is deemed livable and the final inspection, then they're not allowed to have another occupancy.
Well, we use that do not occupy for not just living, it's anything.
Yeah.
If the inspector says do not occupy, that means you can't use that building.
So it's still in operation. It needs-
So again, we might be getting into specifics that are best left with the enforcement team for you to follow up on. So again, I'm sharing with you often in generalities. What does do not occupy mean? It means just that. If there's a breach of it, that sounds like an enforcement issue to be dealt with.
I just heard.
So, just to be clear, when we made our recommendation, the board agreed with it, put that forward. It goes to building inspection. And if your guys don't notice it or don't pick up on it, that the foundation was supposed to be moved over 40 feet, then it's like, oh, we made a mistake.
I
You
would
didn't
put
catch
it, I would put it, I would put the narrative differently. If you remember the decision, it wasn't to say put the foundation this distance from the property. It was a conceptual outline of the
So
footprint.
just a box, say.
Yeah, we tried to confine it as much as possible. Go back to the decision and see, it was part of the board's decision. So I guess match up what that is with what you see on the ground to maybe better answer, did we miss it or not? But to your other point, yeah, we work with our building team on these. And so because this is sort of a new regulation that they're dealing with as well. So we try to ensure compliance and honoring of that decision by working with our building team to help them out at that plan review stage to say, look, does this match what the board approved or not? And fundamentally, yeah, if there's a failure, that's to do what we're supposed to do, that's an administrative failure, if that were to ever happen.
Cause I mean, for us, we have no way of ever viewing the property again. I mean, yes, it's public and whatever else is going on, but at the end of the day, like you said, once it goes on, it's out of our hands, it moves to the next step,
That's
the next step. I guess what we really need, like we've been talking, is better communication to realize how all those steps work. And when we look at something not going the way we think it should, we need better education to understand maybe why it's not. Whether it was this or whether it was that. And I mean,
Well, that's partly why we're here too, as a liaison to this group, because we have some insider information. If we've actually been present at that meeting and heard some of that dialogue, we can share that back. In the same way that it's helpful for the directors to be at this table sometimes, because they're able to hear more of the nuance from the discussion you have with regard to your recommendations to them. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us on specific cases, and either I or some of my staff will be able to answer your question, as I did with you, Randy, and feel free to share that with the group if you want. There's tools available to you as well. So that's why we share links, so you can look this up yourself, like all those decisions that the board makes are public. In our world, like the planning decisions, we have a single page where those decisions live. We have a step to follow up with you as well when the land commission makes a decision, so that you're aware of, and maybe that's a good time to move on to Descharnes. Because in the Descharnes case, we don't have a decision yet, but when we do hear back from the ALC, we have a task within our process to report back to this group.
Really?
But let's just say as an example, in the meantime, none of the regulations apply, so it is made by PLC.
Maybe, just, can you repeat that question, right?
For, in the meantime, while we're waiting for a decision, still allowed to continue operating this sprawl and cross a regional district road that's maintained and put stuff on other property?
I guess it depends, each case is unique, but oftentimes if the process, if an application is if a land is under application, it's not uncommon to withhold or suspend enforcement action until it's resolved. But if there's further breaches, I think that would be of interest to us. It would be of further interest to the land commission as well.
Breaches of just getting.
Like if you're suggesting that there's further violations of land commission regulations or our regulations, then you should just let us know and we can follow up with it.
Like additional non-farm use.
Yeah,
Well, double big is what I would say.
But like the additional non-farm use would just be the expansion of area.
Yeah.
so, but and again, on that point, if I remember correctly, and Roger, Gary, you may remember the specifics, the decision was a point in time. It was I think there was support given to that application with a couple conditions. One was that it not get any bigger from what it was at that point in time. And another, I think there was a timeline given that it would be granted for a certain period and then it would have to cease. That person would have to find another site. So that's is that about right?
And
So that point in time is referenced in the condition of the support from this group.
Yeah.
Whether the land commission approves that or not, let's say they do, then to honor that, they would have to go back and we have record of what it was at that point in time as to the land commission, or if they're sketchy on it, we would share our information of what that site disturbance was at that point in time, and they could rule to enforce that, and it would get scaled back to that.
And they may have developed a more accurate tool because they talked about that aerial satellite tool. And the other thing was there was a question on that one is the amount of use of the road allowance, I believe. Whether or not it was even on ALR, where a lot of the use was on a MODI road, unopened road allowance. So that's another thing. I don't know if there's any follow-up with,
It's on there and it's spread through.
It's probably double, onto the neighboring property as it was when we viewed it.
South side, I don't think it's changed, but it's sure.
A little bit on the stuff.
So a couple things I'll say generally to that. Again, we appreciate when you bring information to us that we can act on, because without it, we can't do anything. I personally don't do the enforcement, as you know, but I pass it on to our enforcement team. Our building inspection team in the past have been effective to get out there and do investigate, and if a stop work is necessary, they do it. To the extent that they have time to do it. So don't ever hesitate to let us know. You've got other means of reporting. You've got the province through their RAP hotline. MODI would be, it sounds like MODI might have an interest here if they're actually operating or doing things within the roadway that we could bring to MODI's attention.
I could show you a dozen examples of people using a road right of way. The continual answer, I could show you probably 20, 30. The answer is, well, it's not
Stay off my
interfering with safe use of the road for drivers, or if it's not interfering with maintenance of the roadway, they don't have time.
Yeah,
So I mean, I'll pull them up, Nelson, if you want, but yeah, I agree, we should.
I think it might
to our new MODI.
I think we've heard of them.
As-
People actually occupying the residences.
There's all kinds of good stuff, so we can talk to Gundel about that, I guess, but I've got a sort of a canned result.
Oh, and there's one other thing I just wanna say generally. We've heard interest from this group, and I think it was Area B Advisory Planning Commission also wanted information on bylaw enforcement, so Jordan, who's in charge of that team, will be preparing a presentation at a future date for all advisory commissions to attend. If you have specific questions, I'd say send them my way and I can pass them on
What
to
do we
Jordan
email?
too.
Yeah.
Oh, you can send it to me, or
I was actually
but
gonna,
do you want the contact page?
I was gonna bring that up because we did mention it at APHC last week.
Because if there's a do not occupy, being occupied, it should probably be looked at.
On our website. I'll bring it up, I'm just gonna show you, it's staff, contact us, and there's a staff directory. And so you can always look up any one of us on the staff.
If you know where they're saying.
Well, it's all listed what they do as well, so in this case, we go to bylaw inspection, or bylaw enforcement, I should say, and then we can see there's Jordan Dupuis. And we can just click on the email and it'll tell us what it is. Sorry, Shane. I'll send it to you. Or
I can also provide that to you guys if any of you need help finding contact.
J
You can
DUPUIS.
US. Thank you.
At rck.bc.ca.
Okay, well, we'll leave that good enough for now, I'd say.
Can I bring up, sorry, one more thing before we move on?
Sure.
Is there a caveat or something provided for abuse, verbal abuse and or said applicants have been speaking to the public and bad-mouthing individuals on our board publicly? Is there any caveats or protection or anything? I guess this comes full circle when we've changed how we have to do everything publicly, forwarded, everything's open, which is not a bad thing. However, I know some applicants are verbally,
So if you're slandered, like,
Slandering.
is there any defense that
Yeah.
the RDCK offers or support RDCK offers you as a commissioner?
yes,
I'd have to follow up unless Gary or Roger know off the top of your head. I would assume so, but I don't know.
it's very blatantly happening.
I've got another question too.
So just for, Gary, do you happen to know if has that ever happened in
No,
the past?
it's, I had a little, almost a bit of a side conversation. What somebody might say to a director, we might just have to let roll off our back, whereas the public shouldn't have to take abuse in the same way.
Yeah, like
And-
an elected official versus a
Yeah.
volunteer sitting on a commission.
And so I think this is something, when we get into a larger conversation, I wanna frame it around recording of meetings,
Yeah.
keeping accurate records, and for future reference and verification, because we're seeing, that, you know, could be somebody recording this meeting right now, maybe not. And it could go on YouTube, or part of it could go on YouTube. So I think we need to frame the conversation as to whether or not people are helping us through their volunteer expertise, maybe being taken out of context and maligned. I'd like to frame that under the conversation about recording meetings and accuracy and accountability.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think we have to take it.
Because
And that's coming up on our agenda real quick.
Cause I would think it's not much of a stretch that if stuff like that comes to light or becomes an issue, these boards, these, the APCs will disappear like that.
And
Cause we aren't gonna put up with it. We shouldn't have to. We're not paid for shit and abuse. So.
And
Like
that's-
you aren't, and neither are our staff,
Still got it, though.
and nor are like.
I say, you know, none of us should have to take it. I still insist that those of you that are paid for all of this is a different level, and maybe you sign up for that to some degree.
I disagree. I
I
nobody
don't, I
deserves
really
that.
disagree, but it's, no, nobody deserves it, but I think it's,
It's a different scale when we're just,
you know, it's like that. And it's like, no, I'm pretty sure we're at the same frame that if we start getting issues where we're gonna get abuse, just because of our involvement in this stuff and our passion for agriculture, our knowledge of agriculture, well, then it's gonna fall apart, and it shouldn't, but it will.
and you're asking us as a volunteer board to kind of do more and more and more. Not in a necessarily bad way, but, you know, we're the boots and the eyes on the ground, so we're reporting said issues and poking the bear, literally. And the more we poke the bear, some applicants feel that it's a personal agenda or whatever it is, and then we're gonna get slandered even more. This slander that has occurred is directly from the applicants that we have just talked about.
No, you don't
for-
wanna be specific about names.
No, I'm not
This
giving
kind of
names, that's why I said it's just about applications that we've recently looked at. And I don't know where, I guess it's something directors can go back to the drawing board and tell us, you know, as you, Nelson, like, what, as a paid person, what is your protocol for a slanderous person or anything that may come back to you? Is there caveats built into your position and your people and your team to deal with that?
We have a harassment policy.
Yeah, we have training and resources, whereas volunteers don't have that. So I mean, there's obviously a difference.
We do rely a lot of it does come down to me, like, I don't ask my staff to deal with those people, I deal with it. I can't put that on them, nor should I, so that's me as a manager dealing with those people, when they abuse my staff, I deal with them. So in the same vein, I wanna see you protected and I wouldn't want to see you harmed either. So I'd say follow up with me further and I'll get back more generally on this question and maybe that, any specific case you're dealing with.
I have a question about,
I'm sorry, guys, I have to leave, I have my doctor's appointment in 5 minutes.
You can take a look, I got a jackknife.
See you over.
I identified it, sorry.
Sorry.
We've seen a lot inside.
what constitutes a conflict of interest?
Okay, we covered that in the orientation. Conflict of interest, again, maybe, but I can follow up with you after with the.
Or just at our next meeting or something? Cause for me, I would think that it's only conflict if you're getting some sort of benefit out of it or you're financially.
It's whatever you think it is, but it's, and then that's where we're not the experts, if you're uncertain, go seek legal advice. But yes, it's often tied to.
What about
the
making a
PPR.
decision on here?
That's where you make that choice for yourself, if you think you should step back from a decision. But yeah, if there's some benefit that could come to you or perceived to be a benefit, then you may wanna step back. But ultimately, we just say, go seek legal advice, if you have any questions.
I think that we
Sort
sort of,
of legal advice that we're supposed to use yours. Make your,
You would hire whoever you like to hire
just
for
our
that.
own lawyers.
More than that.
okay, we sort of kind of morphed into this.
Yep.
Last, piece of the pie here, pertaining to conduct and format of meetings and scheduling. I think I touched on the scheduling earlier about, you know, the way it's come together, this meeting, it's worked out pretty good, because, you know, we were trying for a meeting and it wasn't coming together, so, okay, you know, let's try these days, and I put it back to Sadie, okay, what do these days fit the directors, okay, so we got that, I come back to the guys, okay, this way or that way, and everybody's leaning this way, okay, that'll work. And I think if we can keep it going sort of that way, I think we can keep making it work for most of us anyways. It's, as the season goes on, it only gets tougher, but we'll keep trying.
Afternoons are better for me, cause I have to use vacation for today.
What about doing it in the evenings?
Evenings, then it comes down to more with you guys that wanna travel and so on, like.
Can you not Zoom these meetings?
Can you do like?
Instead of all this traveling, wasting time traveling?
Happily.
Well, I'm just like, I can't see paying the guy the whole day's wages to do a bunch of driving.
Well,
But we can
sometimes
do-
staff will do 4 or 5 things when they're over, like not
Yeah.
necessarily one meeting, so.
But
Today I
then-
took off,
But it's,
yeah.
yeah, it's
And
very,
planning that, with the way our group is, we're down to 2 days.
Yep.
Monday and Friday for a meeting, that's what it comes down to
yes,
with our people.
yep.
So that's gonna make it pretty tough. Now, if one of us or 2 of us or 3 of us are sick and away, we got nothing. And all of a sudden you're taking, well, you guys missed the time limit. Well, that's not fair either. We wanna be able to see these places and make a judgment. We gotta have the time to do it. We also gotta have your 2-week meeting notes. So there's a whole pile of things here that aren't working right now. Makes it too tough. There's gotta be a give and take somewhere.
One thing that I thought of too, being that we're advisory, why, or put it this way, explain to me why meeting quorum is a big deal. Like if 6 of us can't make it, or only 3 can, or only 2 can, we would still have our observations and our opinions or whatever, or advice on that. Is that not acceptable as opposed to canceling a meeting? Especially like the one that was the issue, I guess that was November, when, you know, we didn't know really far ahead that we weren't all gonna make it. And this, I'd say with our schedules, it isn't 9 to 5, so, you know, and like, so if it comes down to quorum, see, and then what got me too after that one, we didn't meet quorum. The meeting got canceled. And we weren't gonna get our opportunity to provide input. Which we weren't happy about, anyway. But then, the next day, well, of course, but we hadn't dealt with it yet at APHC. And yet Roger suggested that he'd like to go see the property. If I wanted to come, I'd come. One of our other APHC members joined. So really, that wasn't a quorum either. We went and had a look at it and discussed it at the meeting. So was that wrong? I don't know. And yet to me, it's like, okay, those of us that went and looked, okay, this is what we saw. This is here, that's there, and the driveway's there, whatever, yada, yada. There was that much information that got out to the rest of the members. So that's, so then I come back, it's like, okay, why was us not meeting quorum such a big bloody deal from our meeting? It's like, there's my thing. And it's like, to me, that, is there a way around that it doesn't need to be?
But you and Roger weren't a meeting. You were not a meeting. You were just observers.
Okay,
So that's,
If two of
Different
us show up at a location, that's just a gathering.
you're not
Is
a
it a
meeting.
meeting?
If you're not quorum of the committee, you're not a meeting.
but then,
So to recap.
we're not
When
allowing
you do site visits, we coordinate those, because we need to get permission from the landowner for you to be on site.
that we
When
already
you're
have.
there, you're gathering information, you're not meeting.
Just looking.
The meeting,
Technicality.
the discussion, your deliberation on an application happens publicly,
Okay, but
with the applicant present,
we had
and
that.
with all the members present, and anyone from the public present. That's why it's important.
See, and yet on that particular one, like, we already had the permission to go, we just were one body short on going. So like I said, there again, why wasn't the rest of us sufficient to put in our observation and our thing? Like, call it a meeting, don't call it a meeting, I don't care, but it's like, you basically lost out on
The input.
the input.
Just the
That's supposed to be
protocol
valuable.
of what they wanna see, right?
So, and then on top of that, to get chewed out about not letting everybody know in time sort of thing, it's like, well, it happens, it didn't happen that day. And, I didn't care for that very much, but whatever.
Wait, who chewed you out?
Regional district.
Their emails were not very friendly,
Yeah.
that any
From
of
me?
us read.
Basically, I'm not sure if it was your words or Sadie's words.
Comes down to wasting taxpayer money.
And all your time and money for setting this thing up, and then you having to undo that, and it's like, well, sorry, that's just the way it turned out. And I've got it in here somewhere, but basically it was like, let's get my ass chewed out for not making this work because of all your guys' work to set it up. And it's like, wow, it didn't sit right, and I didn't really want to bring it out on this whole,
We need to be able to pick the meeting times.
and this
make this
one worked.
Before we get to that, this is an important deal. This is important. If you felt like I've communicated and disrespected you or harmed you, that's a big deal. So we should pull it up.
Yeah, I mean, Randy forwarded most of those emails, if not all, I think. And I have to say, when I looked at it, the tone, it's one of those things, we can all email things or text things and not mean necessarily the way it reads. Unfortunately, was this the case? It was it certainly rubbed me the wrong way of it come down to, Sadie spending all her time, taxpayer money, setting it all up, getting it all up. And it was us on this end that screwed it all up basically because we weren't able to get our crap
I
together.
don't recall saying those words. So let's pull it up. Hey Sadie, are you online? Or sorry, were you finding that message?
It would be,
I'm just trying to pull it up.
November 24th, 2023, potentially, that'd be the string. November 24th, 2023, around that string, probably.
Like I say, I don't know whose words. And like I said, I don't want to pick it on anybody specifically, that's not my intent, the way things read. And we had 3 members that, out of the 6 that were available. And, okay, I guess my math, 50% sounded okay to me. Apparently it wasn't, okay,
So,
whatever. But so three of us didn't get to have a look and give our observation and opinion, which is what we're about. And then just the way this sounded is like, wow, thanks a lot, like, you know, we can, like I say, things happen, our schedules changed, we don't have, like I say,
So-
we've been over that.
so I have it here, was the words, somebody wanted to start by reminding everyone that our staff worked very hard to arrange the meeting for yesterday. Not only did those members who could not attend fail to notify Sadie, et cetera. It's probably those words. So that's November 24th, 2023. Probably you guys should talk about that, not right here in this public meeting if it's a level of communication. But
I was
if you
just gonna
flagged it,
suggest that, like,
if you
first,
flagged it, then you're.
and just to note too, like, I asked you for this before this meeting.
Yeah.
And I sacrificed my day of all the other things I need to do to come here because it's important.
Yeah.
It's important for me to meet with you face to face sometimes, particularly if there's conflict.
Is
So
this,
that's where I'm just gonna say, we should resolve this. We can't do it
is
just
this something you could do like,
but I think we should,
camera off public?
doesn't matter if it's public to me, but
Okay.
and my point is, we need to deal with this. So now I know what's bothering you, and that's important. It's important for you to share when you're upset with me. Cause then we can deal with it. It's out in the open. So now I know. So why don't we schedule something and let's go through this.
I mean,
Would you be okay with that?
yeah.
Just because I'm coming in without information of what's upsetting you till now. I learned about it now. That's not fair to me if you haven't told me in advance. So now I know, so let's deal with that. And not here, but at a future meeting, if you guys are in agreement with that.
I guess some words that just come out of your mouth kind of maybe could be taken a little bit. You sacrificed, we all did, Nelson. I've got cows calving right now. I got out of my tractor and 8 inches of snow at home.
Yeah.
Jumped in my truck, didn't eat lunch, didn't eat breakfast. So be careful when you're talking to agriculture people saying about sacrifices. We all make great sacrifices and do our very best to be here because it is important to us as well. However, in agriculture, it is not a 9 to 5. We know what's happening. Larry could have walked out the door this morning and he had 50 cows out in the neighbors. Dean could have had cows calving or does have cows calving.
Yeah.
So are we gonna leave our cows and this calf in the snow because we don't wanna upset RDCK because we're gonna not meet quorum? Well, there's a balance act that we all have to do.
Dale, I think that's really disingenuous, and I think it's important that we have this discussion.
But you're going to flag this, I hope, and we'll move on to
I just wanna,
other,
I wanna
other.
follow up to something though. Hear the whole message. Yes, we sacrificed, and what else did I say? Because it's important. I'm acknowledging that there's other things that I could be doing that I didn't do to come here today.
All of us do.
Yeah, we all did. So let's get it out.
Except
Not
me,
here
I
in a-
need
in a
groceries,
future
so I wanted to come to town, guys. That's my bad humor today. We need to drop this topic and I'm fairly serious.
I didn't know how far
Yeah.
we wanted to go into this.
Is that the correct email right now?
But anyways, some of it will procedures, bylaws.